Hello and welcome to this second presentation on the so-called Zadok calendar. In this presentation, I will compare the Zadok calendar with other calendars and also address some other topics, some other questions. But before I do that, let's remember why it is important to discuss the calendar. Because if we are following a wrong calendar, we will be celebrating the festivals, the Moedim, at the wrong time. So nothing could be more critical than to establish Yahuwah's calendar. Also, remember to do your own research. Don't expect 100% clarity from my side. On the contrary, I would like to invite you to join the quest. Secondly, don't expect also to finally know which calendar is the best. And thirdly, don't expect to find 100% unity amongst those that believe in a certain version of the Zadok calendar. Remember, this calendar is quite young. It's based on the Dead Sea Scrolls that were found in 1947. And until recent, the Zadok calendar was not discovered in these Dead Sea Scrolls. So, yes, a relatively young calendar compared, for instance, to the Hillel calendar, which was developed in the 6th and 7th century. Okay, what did we discuss already in the first presentation? What's in for this one? Previously discussed was what is the Zadok calendar and do we have proof from Scripture? Today, however, I will make a comparison with other calendars and also address the idea that a month starts with a new moon, which is not correct. I will show you why. Secondly, I will address the question if we can find proof against the sources for this calendar or against the calendar itself, proof from Scripture. Thirdly, why the Jews and most messianic believers do not use it yet. And fourthly, some remaining questions. Okay, just a quick rehearsal. Main aspects of the Zadok calendar: a very stable calendar, always the same amount of days per year, same amount of months per year, same amount of days per month, always the same start of the year at the 4th day of the week. Day starts in the morning, no chance that we have a Moedim on a Shabbat, starting or ending at a Shabbat. First fruit of barley, always at a fixed date, and the 3 main Moedim, always on the 15th of the month, the 1st, the 3rd, or the 7th. So a very stable and well-structured calendar. Confirmed, as I showed in the first presentation, by God's word, by end-time prophecies, by the date of Pesach when Yeshua died, by the first Shavuot on Mount Sinai, also by the first fruit of the barley. Remember, according to the Zadok calendar, the offering of the first fruit is on the 26th, although the harvest is 8 days before. And fifthly, we found confirmation in the Bible because of all that is written about the priestly order of Zadok. I will come into that. I will discuss that in the slides after this one. Sorry. And sixthly, I showed some additional evidence, including David and the showbread. Yes, so what does the Bible say about who's to determine the calendar? Well, before I address that, just this from Jali Pietersma de Jong. She's saying something here, originally in Dutch, and I've translated it because I think it's relevant also for this presentation. If the Zadok priests hadn't followed the proper schedule, as it is passed down in the Dead Sea Scrolls, Yahuwah would never have said they hadn't erred. Do we want to believe and imitate the Zadok priests with their good report, or the Pharisee Hillel who established the calendar of Judaism? Moreover, what does Yahuwah say about the Levites? Should we follow them or another priesthood? Well, actually, Yahuwah ends the Levitical priesthood. We can see that in Ezekiel 44, verse 13 and 15. They, the Levites, will not approach me to serve me in the office of Kohen. However, the Kohanim, who are descendants of Zadok, who took care of my sanctuary when the people of Israel went astray from me, they are the ones who will approach me and serve me. It is they who will ascend me and offer me the fat and the blood, says Adonai Elohim. Yahweh even established a new high priesthood. Therefore, if it had been possible to reach the goal through the system of Kohanim derived from Levi, since in connection with it the people were given the Torah, what need would there have been for another different kind of Kohen, the one spoken of as to be compared with Melchi, and not to be compared with Aharon? For if the system of Kohanim is transformed, there must of necessity occur a transformation of Torah. We can read that in Hebrews chapter 7, verse 11 and 12. So, who is responsible for determining the calendar? Is it the priesthood that Yahushua repeatedly opposes and has been removed from his position by Yahuwah? Or is it the priesthood recognized by him, whose high priest is even from Judah? Just think of this. If you take this seriously, maybe you don't need all the information from the rest of the presentation. I will discuss it anyhow. Okay, let's compare Zadok with other calendars. Well, actually we have several calendars, somehow starting with the equinox. I will discuss only 3 of them today. So Zadok, the Hillel calendar, and the calendar developed by 119 dynasties, which is slightly different from the traditional Hillel calendar. Okay, so all these calendars are connected to the equinox. So what is the equinox? Well, the equinox is when the sun is directly above the equator. Okay, equinox is more scientific, and equinox is more what you see in practice. So equinox means that the measurement is taken from when the center of the sun is at the horizon and is 12 hours sunrise to sunset and vice versa. However, it is the top edge of the sun which is visible first at sunrise and also last at sunset. Also, because of light refraction, there is still light for a time once the sun is no longer visible. This both adds extra time to daylight hours. Hence, the equinox is before the equinox. Okay, let's compare Zadok calendar with Hillel calendar. We see a lot of differences. We see a different amount of days per year. We see a possibility of an extra month in a year in the Hillel calendar. We see a different amount of days per month. We see a different start of the year, a different start of the day. We see the possibility of a Moedim starting or ending at a Shabbat in the Hillel calendar. We see a different date for the first fruit of barley. In the Hillel calendar, the first fruit of barley, it is not so relevant as it seems, whether it's the harvesting or the offering. It's just the first fruit of barley, which is on a certain date. The main festivals also on different days and dates in the Hillel calendar. And as far as I'm concerned, it's not based on the Bible, it's based on Babylon and Antiochus Epiphanes. Here you can see the differences. Only the dates in green are the same. Well, are the same. Yes, you can say that Yom Teruah is on the 1st of the 7th month, and you can say that Yom Kippur is in both calendars on the 10th of the 7th month. But when you start the year at a different day or a different date, these dates don't overlap anymore, of course. And we can see that happening in the year 2022, when the actual overlap was not with Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur, but with the first fruit of barley and with Shavuot. And in 2023, we hardly have any overlap, only a bit of overlap with Pesach and unleavened bread. Okay, let's now compare the Zadok calendar with the calendar developed by 119 Ministries. Well, pretty much the same as the comparison with Hillel calendar. The only difference here is that the OCC calendar doesn't start with the first sliver being visible, but with the conjunction, so the absence of the moon. But in both cases, the question is, does the 15th of the month falls after the spring equinox? If yes, then this is the first month. If no, it is the 13th month and the first month comes next. If you go to this video, this tiny URL of 119 Ministries, you will see their explanation starting at 27 minutes. I've spelled it out here. So we start with determining the spring equinox for a specific year. Then you determine, as the next step, the Jerusalem new moon conjunction. So no sliver, but the absence of moon before the equinox. Then you determine the Hebrew day the conjunction occurs. This Hebraic day is then the first day of the Hebraic month. In the fifth step, you count Hebraic days until you land on the 15th of the month. And if this day lands after the spring equinox, then this Hebraic month is the first month. If not, if it lands before, then this Hebraic month is the 13th month of the Hebraic calendar. And you have to go back to step 2 to determine the new moon after the spring equinox. So it seems quite different than Zadok calendar. However, the start of the year can be the same if the 15th of the month lands before spring equinox. Remember, step 6b, and we have to determine the new moon after the spring equinox, the 20th of March, and this new moon falls on a Wednesday. Because according to the Zadok calendar, it's also a Wednesday that starts the year. And we can see that happening in the year 30 AD. So here there is an alignment with both calendars, So they agree with the March 22nd and a Wednesday as start of the year. Which also means that Pesach is more or less at the same date. More or less, because the Zadok calendar starts the day in the morning, and the Hillel calendar and also our Creator's calendar starts the day in the evening. Okay, like I said, there is the possibility of festivals starting or ending on the Shabbat. So you have to develop certain rules as humans to make sure that this doesn't happen. But in theory, it could happen with Pesach, with unleavened bread, with Yom Teruah, with Yom Kippur, and with the Festival of Tabernacles. Okay. Let's look into the arguments against Zadok. But first, let's show my conceptual framework. So at the heart, for me, it is most important that there is scriptural proof and that the sources for the calendar are reliable. Outside this heart, you can see other questions like, why do the Jews not use this calendar? And does the Zadok calendar imply flat Earth? And finally, some specific questions. Okay, I already showed in the first presentation that yes, we can find a lot of proof and confirmation in Scripture. So let's now address the question, how reliable are the sources of the Zadok calendar? The sources are the first book of Enoch and also Jubilees. (119) Ministries, as well as a couple called Schalk and Elder Clay, tested the reliability of the book of Enoch. They argue, for instance, that Enoch is presented as the Son of Man. Let's see if this is true. Well, I couldn't find it. What I could find is chapter 71, saying that angel came to me and greeted me with his voice and said to me, "You are the Son of Man," son with a not with a capital letter, just a small letter, "who was born to righteousness." Also, chapter 71, verse 17, "And so there will be length of days with that Son of Man," son with a capital S. So he is talking about someone else, not about Enoch. Also, chapter 46, verse 3 and 4, where the angel is saying to Enoch, "This is the Son of Man, this is the Son of Man, who you have seen." So Enoch is not presented as the Son of Man with a capital S. Okay, but they have some other objections, like Enoch 72, verse 37, where it is written that the light of the sun is 7 times brighter than that of the moon, but in size the two are equal. And that's their main problem, because, well, we know from science that this is not true. Well, I don't think this is a problem, because in practice we see them as equal, of the same size. Also, I could not see the problem of the book of Enoch discussing 2 calendars, because I didn't find it. I think the book of Enoch discusses the solar calendar, or I should say the Zadok calendar, because it is not solely based on the sun. Okay, it becomes more serious if we look into chapter 50, verse 8 to 13, where it seems that there are additional rules for Shabbat, but we are not allowed to add to Torah, and these rules seem to be more strict. So what to think of this? Jubilees 50, verse 8 says, "And the man who does any work on it will die, who desecrates this day, who has intercourse with his wife, or whoever says that he has something on it to make a journey that day with a view to any purchase or sale, and whoever collects water on that day, which he did not have for himself on the 6th day prepared, and whoever carries something from his tent or from his house will die." Verse 12 and 13, "And anyone who does any work on it, or travels, or builds his farm, or in his house, or in any other place, and whoever lights a fire, or rides a beast, or travels by ship at sea, or who strikes something, or kills something, a beast or a bird, or an animal, or a bird, or a fish, is catched, or who catches fast or war on Shabbats, the man who does these things on Shabbat will die." So, for instance, how can we still travel on Shabbat and come together if this would still apply? It's a question to me. Okay, so this is a question still not answered. I have to be honest here. It changes, of course, if we include Jubilees as scripture. But yeah, well, then we have to obey to it, don't we? Moreover, this couple's Schalk and Elder Clay argues that we should follow the Pharisees, because Yeshua is telling us, they say, in Matthew 23, verse 1 to 3. And also, Paul was a Pharisee, so let's follow the Pharisees. Well, is Yeshua saying that we should follow the Pharisees? If we read verse 3 more closely, we see that it is written, "Therefore, whatever they tell you to observe, observe and do. But do nothing according to their works. So, do what they say if they read Torah, but don't do what they do. Don't be imitators of them. So, yes, he's saying the scribes and the Pharisees have seated themselves in the chair of Moses. Therefore, do and observe all they tell you. So they read Torah from a physical, literal place in the synagogue called the chair of Moses. Of course, we follow them when they read Torah. But elsewhere in this chapter, Yeshua calls them hypocrites, children of hell, blind guides, blind fools, full of hypocrisy and lawlessness, serpents, a brood of vipers, and murderers. So we should not follow them in what they do and how they behave. And we can go on with the arguments of Zadok and Ezekiel. They argue that the Hashemites replaced the Zadikic priesthood during the Maccabean period because of their support of the Hellenization of the Jewish nation. Well, it's completely the opposite, etc., etc. Don't know anymore if 119 and Zadok and Ezekiel addressed this, but I found it a problem myself, apart from the additional regulations for Shabbat. It's not 100% clear how long Abraham lived according to Jubilees. It is written that he lived 3 Jubilees and a bit, so 175 years. But also, it is written that in Jubilees that he was born in the 39th Jubilee and he died in the 44th. So that would mean 5th Jubilees instead of 3. Maybe a mistranslation. Should it have been the 42nd Jubilee? I'm curious to find out what you think as an audience. Also, not easy to understand whether the Book of Jubilees sticks to the idea of 49 years for a Jubilee or 50. But okay, apart from these few sentences, verses in the Book of Jubilees, which, I do not really understand. I think the sources for the calendar, both Jubilees and Enoch, are quite reliable. So let's address the question, why do the Jews not use it? Well, they use a lunar calendar based on observations of the first sliver of the new moon. This calendar starts at 1 Tishri instead of 1 Aviv, as Moshe was told in Exodus 12. This calendar was set up during the Babylonian captivity and later on formalized by Hillel. Do we find any proof for this calendar in Scripture? Before we address that, remember what Yeshua means. It means we have to return to the Father, to Yahuwah, not to the eldest brother. He is there and we have to be united, but he is corrected as well. He was wrong as well. The older brother was doing his duty. The younger brother left his duty, but it isn't about duty at all. It's about love and following his, not man-made commandments and moedim. We both are veiled. We both can be wrong. So, to make it specific, to make it concrete, when you step out of Christianity and turn to the messianic roots movement, be aware that you have a risk of stepping from one tradition into another tradition. Both is wrong. We should try to understand what God is telling us. Okay, having said that, why did no one use Zadok then? Well, we have seen in the first presentation that there is much biblical proof for the Zadok calendar. So we can safely assume that this was indeed the calendar Israel had to follow. And did follow until a certain moment. So what happened then? Well, for me it's quite obvious. Antiochus and Menelaus changed the calendar from solar to lunar. Onias III was the last faithful high priest in Israel. He was a son of Zadok, descended from both Aaron and Levi. His tenure ended in 175 BC. When the Gentile Antiochus Epiphanes assumed rulership of Israel in 175 BC, he replaced this high priest with Onias' brother Jason. Unlike Onias, Jason was a Hellenist who favored Greek culture. Within 3 years, Antiochus replaced Jason with the totally corrupt Menelaus of the tribe of Benjamin, who sold precious temple vessels to purchase the position of high priest. He then murdered Onias III after Onias exposed him. Yes, Menelaus of the tribe of Benjamin. Do we find any confirmation in Scripture that Benjamin could, that there could be a priest, even a high priest from the tribe of Benjamin? No, we don't, of course. It's only Levi and Judah, because our Savior is from the tribe of Judah. So what happened then? Following their victory over Antiochus in 164 BC, Hellenist Jewish leaders compromised with the Greek rulers by keeping Menelaus as high priest and keeping the Gentiles' lunar calendar. As a result of this compromise, from 167 BC until today, the Jewish religion still uses the lunar calendar. So that's the historical explanation for this. I will now address 3 essential things in the Hillel calendar in which I don't believe anymore. Firstly, the central role for the moon, and the idea that a moon is the same as a month. Or the word for a moon is the same as the word for a month. Yes, the moon is mentioned in the first book in the Bible, first chapter even, like the sun and the stars, as decisive for the modium. Interesting, though, that moon isn't mentioned as such. But does that imply that we have to observe the new moon, and that every month starts with the new moon? Remember who said we should observe the new moon? It was Antiochus Epiphanes. And, well, the Bible doesn't say it, although it may seem so. Let's first check the Hebrew word for moon and month before we argue that the Bible is telling us that we should observe the new moon. And also, let's check what Jubilees and the Book of Enoch say about it, only to find out that we are warned not to observe a new moon. If we dive into the Hebrew words for moon and month, we see that these words are different, totally different. The word for month is chodesh, which is in 90% of the cases translated as month. And the word for moon is yariach, which is in all cases translated as moon. So we can see in Numbers 10 verse 10 that it is about Rosh Chodesh, that it is about month, not new moon. Same goes for Numbers 28 verse 11. The King James translates, however, 1 Samuel 20 verse 5, where it is also written Rosh Chodesh as new moon. But is that correct? We better look at the Septuagint. Here we see that the word neomenia is used. This word has no link whatsoever in Greek with the moon, because it is composed of neo, which is new, and men or menia, which means new month. Sorry, menia means month, so neomenia means new month. The same word is used by Paul in his letter to the Colossians, Colossians 2 verse 16, where it is written, "Let no man therefore judge you in meat, or in drink, or in respect of a holy day, or of the new month, or of the Shabbat days." So the translation, as the King James does, of Rosh Chodesh into new moon is not correct. We see something similar in 2 Kings 4 verse 23, where also the word neomenia is used. So that probably also means that Psalm 81, where it is written sound the shofar at Rosh Chodesh, should be translated as blow up the trumpet at new month. Also in Isaiah 66 verse 23, we should translate it into new month and not new moon. So I think we could say that the myth is busted. The Hebrew word for month used in these verses I showed is not the same as the word for moon, Yariach. And where it is nevertheless translated as moon, we see on the basis of the Greek translation that it is not okay. Okay, but someone might be clever and say that besides Yariach, we also have Yerach, which is connected to this word, and sometimes is translated as month. Okay, I will address these verses from the Bible as well. Let's first look at Exodus 2 verse 2, where it is written, when she conceived and had a son, upon seeing what a fine child he was, she hid him for 3 months. So maybe it is the correct translation. Let's assume so. Maybe there is a lunar calendar at that moment before the Exodus, starting maybe at Tishri. But what does Yahuwah do at the Exodus? He changes the calendar. We have to start at Aviv 1. So this is no proof at all. We see something similar in 1 Kings 6, where it is written, the foundation of the house of Yahuwah was laid in the 4th year in the month of Ziv. Here the word Yara is used. In the 11th year in the month of Bul, also Yara, which is the 8th month, Chodesh, all parts of the house were completely exactly as designed. Thus he was 7 years building it. So we could read this as proof that we use 2 different words for the same thing, or we could see that this is proof for 2 different calendars, in which in one calendar all months except for one have no name, sorry. Although it puzzles me that in 1 Kings 6 verse 1, Ziv, a month, is also named as Chodesh. I don't know why. This somehow is not in line with the idea that all months without a name have Chodesh and all months with a name have Yariach. Also, why is ethylene called Yera? I don't know. This is done in 1 Kings 8 verse 2. Are we seeing synonyms here or something else? Or if there is a different calendar which doesn't synchronize with the lunar one, wouldn't we expect something like the lunar month, which is in the Zadok month? Because it will most of the times not 100% overlap. Two Kings 15 verse 13, we see a certain Shalom, the son of Yavesh, who began his reign in the 39th year of Uzziah, king of Judah, and he reigned a full month in Samaria. Well, that's the translation of the King James and the complete Jewish Bible of the word Yera. But I question this because why use a lunar calendar? Or was Shalom just king for one full moon, so one day? Maybe because the next verse is, for Menahem, the son of Gadi, went up from Tirzah and came to Samaria and smote Shalom, the son of Jabesh, in Samaria and slew him and reigned in his stead. Okay, we have several verses from the book of Job. But why would a lunar calendar be used there? On the other hand, how could Job ask for a night to be counted, not to be reckoned with into the number of months? You don't take a month to be born, and a night doesn't last for a month. So translating Yera into month here seems to me to be out of place. It's just the moon he is referring to. Same goes for Job 7 verse 3, Job 29 verse 2, 39 verse 2, Zechariah 11 verse 8, we see a comparable thing. So we are already at the final straw. Maybe Psalm 104 verse 19 still has a central role for the moon, because the King James says he appointed the moon for seasons, the sun knoweth his going down. Well, just compare what the book of Enoch says about it. On stated months, it changes settings, and on stated months, it makes progress on each. In 2, the moon sets with the sun, and in those 2 gates which are in the midst, in the 3rd and 4th gate, it goes forth for 7 days and makes its circuit. I discussed that with Matthew from Torah is Light, and he said that here it clearly states that the moon sets with the sun. After studying solar and lunar movements, I was able to confirm that the moon does in fact set with just a few degrees of the sun's location on the horizon. This happens twice and only in the spring, generally bookending the equinox. However, these events sometimes lag. And this lag that we have been using to determine when to intercalate. It's this lag that we have been using to determine when to intercalate. That would make the moon a marker for the seasons or moed, or appointed times, as a start if the year determines the feast calendar. As the start of the year determines the feast calendar. The reference to the sun knowing its place of setting in Psalm 104 ties this whole thing together. And here you can see that in a picture. So you see that there is a certain alignment of sun and moon in the 3rd and 4th gate. And the 3rd and 4th gate are close to the equinoxes. So, yes, what it basically comes down to is please use your normal principles when you read something before arguing, before thinking you know what truth is. I mean, are we 100% sure which vowels were used in the original text? No, they have been added by them in the Masoretic text in a certain way, but we are not 100% sure. Also, ask yourself, when is the word Yariach or Yerach used for the first time? What does it mean there? We might say Exodus 2 verse 2, and there it means month, but if we include Yariach, it is Genesis 37 verse 9, and there it means moon. And this principle, where is a certain word used for the first time, is a very basic principle. And if we use it here, we can quite clearly see that Yariach and also Yerach means moon. Also, how often is a certain word translated in a certain meaning? It also helps to decide that in most cases, Yariach is translated as moon. And finally, test your own opinion. Is there maybe a different explanation for a different meaning than the usual one? Finally, please read this, because it's a warning for them from the book of Jubilees, not to observe new moons. For there will be those who will assuredly make observations of the moon, how it disturbs the seasons and comes in from year to year 10 days too soon. Indeed, that it happens, since 364 minus 354 is 10. And they will confound all the days, the holy with the unclean, and the unclean with the holy. For they will go wrong as to the months and Shabbats and feasts and jubilees. So my conclusion with respect to the moon is that it is vital for the calendar, as I also showed in the first presentation. But the Hebrew word for the new month is not the same as for new moon. In fact, nowhere in Scripture do we read this combination of these two words, new moon. We don't see Rosh Yariach or Yeriach. And we are definitely not told to observe a new moon as start for the month. On the contrary, Jubilees wants us not to observe it, or else we will go wrong on the dates of Shabbats and feasts. Okay, next topic. Does the day start in the evening or not? Let's read the first chapter in the Bible. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, not the other way around. So there was evening, Erev, and there was morning, Boker, one day. We have two witnesses of this concept that a day starts in the morning. Maybe there are more. I'm open to your suggestions, but these are the ones I found. First, the Exodus. In Exodus 12, verse 18, we see that we have to celebrate from evening of the 14th till the evening of the 21st day, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Also, we read in Leviticus 23, verse 5, that on the 14th of the day of the month, Pesach starts. And in Numbers 33, verse 3, it is written that on the 15th day of the first month, the morning of the Pesach, the people of Israel left Egypt. So what do we deduce from these three verses? First, eating unleavened bread began on the evening of the 13th of Aviv and continued for 7 days until the evening of the 7th day, which is the 21st of Aviv. Also, Pesach is definitely included in this festival of unleavened bread because it starts at the evening of the 14th. And thirdly, Israel left on the morning after Pesach, the morning of the 15th. When is this morning of the 15th? Well, according to Zadok, in which the day starts when it becomes light, it is the morning immediately following the evening of the 14th, so in accordance with Torah. Hillel states that the day starts in the evening, so normally the morning of the 15th will be a day later, wouldn't it? But then Israel would have waited 1 day? Of course not. Pharaoh and the Egyptians wanted them to go ASAP. And it also says in scripture that the morning after Pesach, so right after, no day in between. So Hillel is not according to Torah. You can see that here quite clearly. So according to Zadok, they celebrated Pesach on the evening of the 14th of Aviv, and they left the other day in the morning, the 15th of Aviv, which was still the 14th of Aviv according to Hillel. But this is not true. Another witness is Yeshua's last Pesach. We can see that in Matthew 26, the disciples asked on the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread where Yeshua wanted to prepare them to eat the Passover, the Pesach meal. And then the disciples did as he appointed them, and they made ready the Pesach meal. Now when the evening was come, he sat down with the 12. So the question here is also, what is that first day and when does it start? Well, we see that the disciples began preparations during the day, because in the evening it is Pesach. We also know from Exodus that unleavened bread began on the evening on the 14th of Aviv. So day 1 of this festival ended before the evening of 15th of Aviv, with 15th of Aviv being a rest day. So the only option is that the 14th of Aviv started already in the morning. Otherwise, it is not the first day of unleavened bread, but 1 day before. We can see that here. So in the Zadok calendar, we have two things happening. The 14th of Aviv started in the morning, but also the festival of unleavened bread started in the evening of the 14th of Aviv. Both is true, and both is on the 14th of Aviv. So it is possible that the disciples would prepare the Pesach meal on the 14th of Aviv in this calendar. However, in the Hillel calendar, there would have been the 13th of Aviv, because the evening did not start yet. And you can see that that is not true, because that's not the first day of unleavened bread, the 13th of Aviv. And if it would have been the 14th of Aviv, it would already have been the first day of unleavened bread. So there is really a problem here with the Hillel calendar, because the festival would already have started in the evening, and they still had to make preparations, which is not possible because it was a Shabbat. So I agree with this presentation, in which you can see that the day starts in the morning. So it was evening and it was morning, and we had a certain day, the first day or the second day, and after that came the next day. Okay, so I showed that we cannot say that moon is month or new moon is new month. We cannot say that the day starts in the evening, and we can also not say that a year can be 30 months long. And we do not find proof in Scripture, although some people argue we do. And they refer to the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel was told to lie on his side for 430 days, 390 for Israel and 40 for Judah. In Hillel, that could have been 1 year and 3 months. However, it seems that we only have 1 year and 2 months, based on Ezekiel. So there we have it. We need to have an additional month in order to have this 1 year and 3 months to arrive at 430 days. Not so quickly. It's only one witness, and remember, we always need to have 2 witnesses. Also, this witness is not reliable at all. 430 days is 1 year and 3 months in the Hillel calendar, assuming too many things. First, assuming 353 days per year instead of 354. Also assuming 29 days per month instead of 29 and a half. Secondly, Ezekiel did not start with lying on his side on the 5th of the 4th month. He started at least 7 days later. And thirdly, we can discuss whether he was sitting or just dwelling in his house, which can be anything, also lying. So he could still be doing the 430 days when the elders of Judah came in chapter 8, which worked out well because he was lying on his side for Judah. So, yeah, I can go on arguing, but I think I quite clearly showed why it is not biblical to follow the lunar calendar as followed by the Jews. Okay, does the Book of Enoch support flat Earth? You can think it does when you read chapter 18, where it says, I saw the foundations, I saw the cornerstone, I saw the end of the earth, the firmament. And this was important to me because I had extensively researched this topic before diving into the topic of the calendar. And I still think the earth is spherical. Luckily enough, I found other passages in the Book of Enoch. For instance, chapter 78, verse 5, where it says that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. That's not possible with the flat earth model. Also, not possible in a flat earth model is winds causing the sun and moon to move. And more important, chapter 78, verse 4 talks about light transferring from the sun to the moon. This is totally consistent with the conventional understanding that the moon shines by reflecting the sun's light, but definitely not with the flat earth model. So still all in green, that's good. What about the final specific questions? Well, let's start with the most important one, because if all dates are fixed, including Yom Teruah, how can it be that Yeshua says nobody knows the date and the hour of his return at Yom Teruah? Will there always be a first body for the wave offering? What about the time the lamb had to be slaughtered at Pesach? Is that a problem for Zadok? And fourthly, how to combine Zadok with the 365 and a quarter days that the earth needs to orbit the sun. It does not equivalent to 360 days of the Zadok calendar. So how to align this? Also, how to combine this calendar with the scheme for reading the parasha, as well as my own birth parasha. Also, how to combine Zadok calendar with the blood moons we have seen at the festivals celebrated in the past when we kept the Hillel calendar. And fourthly, why to count between the first fruit and Shavuot if all dates are fixed. Yes, in the Hillel calendar, Yom Teruah depends on the new moon, so it is indeed unsure. We don't know the date and the hour. In Zadok, it does not depend on the new moon, so it does not seem to be unsure which date, but the hour is still to be determined. However, there are at least 3 ways to do intercalation to align 364 days with 365 and a quarter. So we are still unsure. Here, a table with expected new moon and Yom Teruah dates. Just for showing what's possible. New moon in several years from 2022 to 2028. The expected start of the 7th month according to Hillel. Yom Teruah according to the Jewish calendar. Well, they don't call it Yom Teruah, they call it Rosh Hashanah. And fourthly, Yom Teruah according to the Zadok calendar. That does not align in most cases, only in the year 2025 and 2028 it seems to align. I don't think there is a possibility that we will not have a first fruit, because by the time you get to the spring equinox, virtually all barley would be aviv in Israel and ready for the first fruits offering. It seems that there would always be enough barley to offer for the entire nation if one waited until the first moon after the spring equinox to harvest the barley. Also, I don't think that the time of slaughtering the lamb is a problem for Zadok calendar. In the Bible, Israel was told to slaughter it at dusk, between sundown and complete darkness. So what is this between 2 evenings? At least 3 different explanations. Some say it is between noon and 6 p.m. Others say it's near nightfall, so more closely, so between 3 and 6 p.m. And others say it's between 6 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. In a way, it's strange, since the Hebrew word is Erev, so it's definitely in the evening and definitely not option A, as far as I can see it. And if you look at both calendars, in both calendars, it's possible to slaughter the lamb at dusk. So on the Zadok calendar, the lamb would have been slaughtered on the 14th of Aviv before nighttime. And the Hillel calendar, it would have been slaughtered before the end of the 14th of Aviv, before a new day would start, so before nighttime, which is basically explanation B. Yes, as I already indicated, there needs to be a certain alignment between the 364 days on the one hand and 365 and a quarter day on the other hand. But that's not only a problem for the Zadok calendar, of course. All other calendars have the same problem. Even the Gregorian calendar has this problem. And there are solutions for this. And one simple solution, but there are others, at least 2 other methods. One simple solution is to wait for the spring equinox to land on the 4th day and then integrate by adding a week, in order to assure the year always starts after the spring equinox. Yeah, like I said, I know what my birth parasha is according to Hillel's calendar, and it seemed to fit well, but I don't know how it is within the Zadok calendar. Also, in the past, it was quite special to see several blood moons on the several festivals. And I expect less blood moons on festivals in the Zadok calendar, but have not studied this well yet. One of the final questions, why do we have to count between the first fruits of barley till Shavuot if all dates are fixed? Why do we need to count 7 times 7? Do we see any parallel in Scripture? I think there is a parallel with Jubilee. And also we need to count our days, as is written in Psalm 90, verse 12. So counting the Omer maybe is an exercise to remember to do the same with the Jubilee. So the overall conclusion, for me, it seems pretty much okay. Many arguments pro Zadok calendar. So the question now is, where do we stand? Where do I stand? Where do you stand? Well, it would not surprise you, it will not surprise you that I have started to follow a Zadok calendar, and I trust the Lord to solve the other issues. Basic principle for me is that the calendar on earth should reflect the one in heaven, meaning it cannot depend on human observation, and meaning also that the priesthood selected by my Lord, my Father in heaven, is leading, and not the Pharisees or Sadducees. So yeah, if needed, my apologies to those who have been told by me to observe the moon and to follow the Jewish calendar. Question also is not only where do I stand, but also where do you stand? Will you still keep following traditions of man and cling on to a moon-based calendar? And will you observe the moon before anyone can start, or even the first barley before the year can start? Will you be afraid to be accused of anti-Semitism? Will you be afraid to stand alone? Well, don't be afraid. There are already many others that have started to follow the Zadok calendar. And it isn't anti-Semitic, as I've shown in the first presentation. Basic question is, will you follow Yahuwah? He himself stated that, as shown, the priesthood of Zadok is an eternal priesthood and is in fact the only priesthood allowed in the last temple. And we have seen that Yeshua was a priest from the Melchi Zadok order. Sadly enough, the Zadok priests have been driven out of the temple during the Hasmonean reign. This was my second, for now, final presentation on the Zadok calendar. If you want to know more, or if you want to comment, if you want to receive a PDF version of this presentation, please send an email to avivalef@gmail.com. Thank you very much for watching this presentation. Shalom.